Hello, members. Tom Morrison here from Nashville, Tennessee, home of the Metal Treating Institute, and we're here to talk industry specifications. This team that you're going to see today met for a solid hour and a half a couple of days ago. There is lots to talk about in a lot of different areas of Nadcap, AMEC, ASTM, CQI9, so lots of good stuff. Some people think it's heartache. Some people think it's moving forward in high quality, but we're going to decide that today. So I'm glad you're here. One thing I wanted to share with you before we get going is, man, MTI puts on a couple meetings at Nadcap, a couple big events that we had this past month. They host some of the AMEC meetings for the aerospace standards. They do some stuff with CQI9, and that doesn't come without a cost, the Metal Treating Institute. And we're excited that we have a select few companies that have said, you know what, this is important enough to us and important to our customer and the suppliers. They've put their money on the line and help sponsor these things so MTI can deliver world-class representation and give you, the member in the heat treating world, a loud voice in the process. So I just like to mention those. So the following companies have been sponsoring this activity throughout the year. So you got GeoCorp in the thermocouple world. You got Thermovac Technology, a heat treater in California. Thermofusion, a heat treater in California as well. And Throughput Blue Streak, they have shop management software for the industry. And you got Gasbury Thermal Processing Systems, a furnace manufacturer out of Michigan, as well as Super Systems out of Cincinnati. So great companies. If you ever see them or see those name badges, make sure to shake their hands and say thank you for the work that you're helping MTI do around the country in the world of industry specification. So right now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have each of our people online. For anybody listening that don't know, I'm going to have them introduce themselves. So Stephen, let's start with you.
Hi, I'm Stephen Keckler. I'm a process metallurgist for ThermTech, and I sit on several different ASTM committees, primarily focused around mechanical and indentation-based hardness testing, as well as metallography and thermocouples.
So Ed, let's go to you.
Ed Engelhard, Solar Atmospheres. I work with Nadcap, AMEC, ASTM, and been very deeply sunk into AS13100 over the last year.
Sunk in is a good way to describe it, right? Roy, how about you?
My name is Roy Atkins. I'm with Braddock Metallurgical. I chair the AMEC committee. I also sit on the Heat Treat Task Group for the Supplier Support Committee representative, and just try and get involved as much as I can.
Thanks, Roy. And Joanna Lisa.
Good afternoon, everyone. Johanna Lisa, Continental Heat Treating and Quality Heat Treating. I'm the Director of Quality Assurance for those companies. I have been participating in the Heat Treat Task Group since 2000. I'm a supplier voting member on the Heat Treat Task Group, an alternate on the AQS Task Group, and the AQS representative to NMC.
Thanks, Joanna. So Bob Ferry should be joining us at some point in time, so he had to step out for a second. Here comes Bob. Let's welcome him right in. He'll come. Bob, you there?
I'm here now, finally.
Awesome. Well, we'll say hello to everybody. The whole world is watching you and zeroed in on you. So go ahead. We're just having everybody share who they are in the process here. So share what you do with the Technical Standards Committee.
Awesome, great. I'm a co-chair for the Technical Standards Committee, and certainly I'm on the Nadcap committee where I'm a voting member there, and also I get involved with the AMEC specification reviews, and just try to help out every way I can with the Technical Standards Committee.
Well, what I want to say to this group here is thank you so much on behalf of the members for the work you're doing. When we did a survey last year, we asked all the members how big of an impact does technical specifications play in your bottom line and your productivity and quality. And over 70% said it plays a huge impact on everything about their company. So this is really big work and does really big things. And so with that said, Roy, I'd like to go to you since you've been so active at like the Supplier Support Committee and on the NADCAP area. But I want everybody to kind of chime in. For people listening, what is the big deal about technical specifications, and why should people listening in that maybe aren't attending these meetings, why should they be going to these meetings and being tied in to what's going on with what this big impact to their company?
Well, the thing of it is if you're not involved and you wind up being more of a victim than you do a player in the industry, because what happens is you don't realize the things that are coming down the pike, and all of a sudden you get an auditor in the door and you get surprised. It can be a big shock. The thing that we've talked about, even at our last NADCAP meeting that MTI hosted, there was a pre-meeting, and as I said, and a few other people had reiterated, it's great to go to NADCAP meetings and be involved in these supplier task groups and things of that nature. But the real root of everything that comes through those checklists begins with the specifications. And that's one of the reasons why I joined the AMEC committee, is because we see a lot of the heat treat specifications that come down. We make a lot of, I should say, suggestions, but we basically do the edits on all those specifications, and then we send them up to the commodity committee. So I would encourage you not only just to be active in your NADCAP heat treat task group, but also get on the ground floor of what's going on with those specifications that are driving those checklists to begin with.
Well, and what I don't think a lot of people really recognize is that to be on the AMEC committee, I mean, and Roy, you correct me if I'm wrong, and Ed, y'all been there. Anyone that has a metallurgical or heat treating / engineering background has the ability to interpret or understand and give input to these specs. Anyone's invited to be a part of that committee. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, the thing of it is right now we're seeing a situation, and I mean, everybody in all of their plants have seen it. You think there's just a deficit of people to work out on the floor. There's also a deficit of talent as well. We've seen a lot of people retire from our industry, and we need all those different. We need different people to come in and give us different aspects from different specifications. Not all of us work on every specification. It comes through AMEC or even the commodity committees. But if we have a diverse enough group, we can actually come to a consensus. And there's some things that just make sense, that are common sense. And so that's the way we move specifications forward. Without that talent, and by the way, even if you have young engineers and it's a very good way to train them in how the specifications are made, and even sending them, and they'll ask questions. And sometimes questions are just as important as answers are, because when the question is asked, someone usually comes up with the answer. And then sometimes there's that moment where everybody goes, wow, we really never thought of that. Maybe we need to write this into a spec, or maybe that's a problem.
Let's kind of switch gears just a little bit to Stephen. You're very active with the ASTM for MTI and reporting and going to those meetings. And I know there's a number of heat treaters that go to that, but I know that's probably one of the areas that we really do need some more people to want to get volunteered and go to these meetings. So tell us a little bit of just not the update, but just about what happens at an ASTM meeting and how many meetings there are a year and what members could look to do if they would get involved.
Sure. Yeah, ASTM is definitely an area where, especially on the testing side for hardness and mechanicals, I mean, basically everything goes back to the ASTM standards. We all kind of live and die by them. It's going to vary a little bit committee to committee, but for all the stuff that we would be interested in, they pretty much meet in person twice a year, usually beginning of May and then at the beginning of November. And then there's some additional online ballots, like 4 to 8, depending on how many subcommittees you choose to sit on, and how active they are. And then if you're working on an active ballot, you might have some more time, but invested. For the most part, it's not a very large time commitment necessarily outside of the committee weeks for the travel. Joining ASTM is actually very straightforward. It's not terribly expensive. You do need to be a person who has a pursuing interest in this. I mean, it's definitely not for everybody, but if you're a quality manager, an owner, or even a lab manager, it's probably something that you would fit in great with. And we definitely need a lot more user input in these committees. They're largely seated by either manufacturers or like the test labs. And while their perspectives are good and useful, they don't necessarily hear a lot from the people who are using it every day the way we use them.
Well, awesome. That sounds great. So now let's get in. So what I'm hearing here. Go ahead, Roy.
Kind of add to that real quick. A lot of the stuff they do is lab grown, and some of the things we do in the real world don't always work out the same as they do under perfect conditions. I just wanted to add that real quick.
Sure. Well, I do think the AMEC committee has really tapped into MTI to giving them a real world perspective. I'll always get questions, say, Tom, can you survey the members of the heat treating community and tell us what's going on the street? Because we know what's going on in our minds, but how does it really translate into real world heat treat? So think Stephen and Roy are absolutely right. Getting involved helps them give an understanding through your eyes and these specs that they're written. So that said, members, what I want to tell you is if you have a quality manager or a sales engineer, somebody who understands, or even the owner want to come, all those different levels are coming to all these meetings and having an impact with it and like you to. So if you would, I'd love you to email me at tom@heattreat.net. That's tom@heattreat.net. If you'd like to volunteer in any capacity to be a part of any one of these committees, and I will help connect you in with the right path to do that. So that said, let's jump into the specs. So Mr. Bob Ferry, you always lead with us with CQI 9. I know they're not meeting all the time, but there's always things moving. So what's going on with the CQI in the automotive world?
Yeah, so again, CQI 9 right now, because they had put out revision 4 not too long ago, they're just letting that kind of settle in the industry, and any feedback that they hear from the users of that CQI 9 self-assessment are directed back to the committee. We're meeting quarterly now, so they kind of save them up, and then we address them as we meet, and then send out answers unless it's something that needs an immediate response, and at which point they'll send an immediate response out, and then we'll talk about it as a committee at the next meeting. So that's how it's been going this year. There was some rumblings where they're going to start getting together more frequently to start looking at revision 5, because it usually takes a couple of years to get this thing out to into everybody's hands out in market. So they want to start working on this thing early, just to try to clean up some of the things that resulted from the questions that came, and you know, it's, for the most part, it's going pretty smoothly. Everybody's seems to be pretty happy with where the revision 4 wound up. So that's where we're at. Next meeting's in May, and I think I think I'll have more information maybe towards the end of this year as to how revision 5 is going to start shaping up, and what our plans are there. So so far everything looks good.
Awesome, Bob. Well, thank you for that. Thank you for that report. So Stephen, you're our chief guy at the ASTM. Tell us what's going on in the world of hardness testing and the other lab stuff.
Sure. Not a lot has changed from our last presentation, since we haven't had a full committee meeting since then. And I would encourage you to go back to our last presentation to get kind of a more full list of all of the ballots that are in progress right now. But I do have a few update notes of interest, which is E110 for portable hardness testers. I had mentioned last time there was a bit of a questionable ballot as to whether or not it would pass to stay out of historic status. I'm happy to report that did go through without any problems. So that's remaining active. You won't have to have any awkward conversations with her about why you're using a historic spec. That is going to get some fairly substantial revisions, probably going into the next year, probably before that gets out, but that is coming down the pipe. The changes in reporting for conversions, and then specifically for E92 conversion and curvature correction, passed through subcommittee. There was a couple negative votes at main committee, but I guarantee you that is going to move forward. It's just a matter of going through the formalities. So going into this next year, you should expect those changes to come in to play. And then there is some additional work on E18 regarding how you should, or in fact should not, use some error information when doing indirect verification, but that is also going to be a while before that comes out, and for most of it, it's probably not going to have a super serious impact. A370 is also undergoing some more revisions having to do with how you present data at reporting, but A370 gets updates like this a couple times a year. So you should just pretty much plan on, if it's a document you use, you should just plan on ordering it basically every year and going through it for its changes. Otherwise, there's a lot of updates for the metallography specs that are in progress, but they're also going to be a while before they go through. Most of them aren't going to have really major changes. It should be like clarifying edits for the most part on those documents. I'll let Ed speak about it a little more. He's a little more in touch with it than I am, but as far as thermocouples go and stuff like that, Class D thermocouples have officially been entered in as a standard thing, if that's something you're interested in and have been looking at. And then otherwise, there's been more progress on both cryogenic, so very low temperature application, and then some stuff for really high temperature refractory stuff that's been making progress as well.
So Stephen, real quick, so where do members go if they're interested in getting what's the easiest way to get to the specs and stuff that you referred to on the website?
So the most direct way to do it would be to go to ASTM.org. And you could look up, they actually have, they're in the final phases of updating it. They have a specification tracker that you can set up if there's specific specs you're interested in, and they'll send you a bulletin anytime there's an update. At the moment, that's fairly clunky, but they are working on it. It is making progress. I believe next week is when they're going to be rolling out the next update on that, make it a little more user-friendly.
Okay.
And then otherwise, if you use if you use a third-party service, there are a lot of third-party services that will offer to automatically send you updates when specs are revised. So that also potentially could be an option for people to look at.
Okay, awesome. Well, Stephen, I appreciate the update and you attending the meeting with the other heat treaters on behalf of MTI. And I know you said you may have to cut out early, but I just want to say thank you for all the stuff that you're doing for the ASTM for us, for the committee. All right, so let's move into AMEC. So let's start with Mr. Roy and Ed. Either one of y'all want to take the reins and kind of review what happened in the last AMEC meeting?
Well, I'll defer to Roy. I've been out of the loop a little bit.
Well, I just want to make everybody aware of a little bit of everything that's been going on within AMEC. We have a situation where a lot of times we skip from meeting to meeting depending on the availability of our sponsors. But couple things, MIL Standard 1537, which pretty much everybody's been using for conductivity testing, that it's pretty much been under the control still of the military, in particular Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. And we finally got them to agree to maybe turn that into an ASTM or some other SAE standard. Right now, it looks like there is some interest, even more so from an ASTM side of things, because that is testing. And there's a committee, E07.07, that looks like they may be interested in taking that over from AMEC. And if they are, I think that might be a good thing. But I don't know that we would be as well equipped to rewrite that standard as possibly an ASTM team would be able to do, but we are up to the task if it should come down to it. AMS 2770 for aluminum raw material. We've got a ballot that just closed on that, or it's going to close. It's closed on the 28th of February. I'm sorry. And there's, we're going to have, we'll be talking about that. I think that's just about wrapped up, and we'll be making, talking about comments, basically on the, on what was balloted and making sure before we send it off to committee, to the commodity committees. Just seen someone ask, the MIL standard for that is MIL standard 1537 for conductivity. So, so some of the other things that we've been working on is 2770 came up for review. There were some at first. This standard has been kicked around a few times. It's went through committee. There's been a lot of controversy over trying to get a brazed aluminum brazed parts in there, requirements for that. That's not went so well. We are going to reboot that again because the previous sponsor decided that there was an issue with, they didn't want to do radiation surveys on their aluminum braze ovens, and so they acquiesced and said that we don't want anything to do with it. I don't want anything to do with it if we can't get that put through. But fear not, that issue could come up again in AMS 2750. So that issue in and of itself is not dead yet. What I did was, as the chair, I brought someone else in. They're going to use those comments from the last go around, from the last ballots that's used, and we're going to try and come up with any changes that need to be made. So that's kind of like took a bit of a step back for a little bit. So you won't see anything on that for a little while. AMS 3025 for polyalkyl glycol quenchant. I guess this quenchant, there's an issue with this spec. The people are having a hard time. There may be some environmental issues with it. There may be availability of product. I don't know what's going on, but we've got somebody looking into that as well. Okay, and I'm sure that'll probably come up again in Nashville as well. There's a team working on a draft for that, and AMS 2759/4. It's up for a 5-year review. Jeff Koss from Boeing is looking at that. We don't know if there's going to be any changes or not. There's not been a lot of talk about it right now. He's going to review it, and then he'll bring forth he'll either ask for a draft or tell us what he thinks needs to be changed on that. And as a user, if you're at AMEC and this comes up during the committee meeting, please, raise your voice and say, well, I don't think it should be just ratified. We've got a problem with it. So as a user, it's important for you to actually be there and try and get things changed if you perceive an issue with it. 2759/6 for gas nitriding. It's up for it's been up for review. It's been balloted a couple of times. We're going to discuss that in Nashville. That closed on the 1st of this month. There's been some controversy about, and rightfully so, I feel, about the final tempering temperature, the tempering temperature for preparing that material for nitride, and being able to select an adequate set point temperature. That also will feed into 2759/11 as well. And so between those two specs, and I've asked a few people, in time you've talked to someone about coming in and talking about that in Nashville, so that we make sure that those two standards align when it comes to that issue. I think that's one of the biggest glaring issues with that standard, is that 50 to 100 degrees for temper. It's ridiculous, because some of those parts come in a condition, and if they come in a condition they want them nitrided, then we got a problem. Some of the other things that we're working on, 2759/9. There's been a lot of controversy with this spec as well, as it pertains to the hydrogen embrittlement relief of fasteners. We had a gentleman that has done some research and petitioned the AMEC committee to lower the threshold for the bakeout on these fasteners down to 150 KSI instead of 180 KSI. And there's very little support for that. Boeing, Collins Aerospace, Ken Savo, who actually is the chairman of the aerospace committee, had even written us a letter and saying that this is just not a good idea. There was a lot of different investigations and things that came out. We don't know, the one thing is this gentleman used a certain type of material. We don't know what the material was. We don't know what the stress load will be on that fastener. So no one's comfortable with removing the bakeout requirement on those fasteners. We have ARP 8. They want to look at ARP 1341, and I don't know. And Tom, I think you might have sent out something on this. But ARP 1341 is carburizing decarburization of material. It's basically your standard, I guess most people will call it a surface contamination test. And we were asking the question, how many people really use that? Because we have ARP 1820 that is called out in 2759, and everybody seems to feel that's sufficient. But when Jim Coney, some of you may know, Jim Coneybear was looking at those two specs and comparing them. He basically came to the he basically said, well, they're not the same. One of them's a little too stringent than the other one, and that if anything, if we keep 1341, which in his opinion we didn't need to, that we should bring it at least bring it in line with 1820. So that's pretty much all I've got for right now for AMEC. Oh, well, and by the way, let me remind you that 2750 is now on a 2-year review, and we'll be going over quite a few parking lot items in Nashville in April, and start preparing to rev that up when the 2-year review comes up on it. And a lot of the things that I've seen are clarifications that Doug Schuler's is the subcommittee chair on that. And there's just a lot of the things that we're doing and we're cleaning up are basically things that's been seen in audits that's got called out. And so there's a lot of misinterpretation of what the standard is saying, basically. And the good thing now, though, with AMEC and Nadcap, I think we're getting better at talking to each other, because we actually have questions that come up, and I think staff engineers get a little more involved with AMEC as far as, hey, this is a problem. It's something that's being written up in an audit. What is the intent of the standard? Because this guy's trying to write me up for something that I don't think is right. So, and I think, give a lot of credit to Doug Schuler for helping us out on that.
Real quick, Roy,
Yes, sir.
to me, that's a huge connection, though, because I remember some people coming in from AMEC to their first Nadcap meeting, and they were involved in some of the specs, and they're shaking their heads going, that's not what that was meant to do. So I think that's a huge element for them to connect at that level, so that transition of intent is passed on to Nadcap, so that you're getting audited for the checklist in the right manner.
Well, the thing that I find amazing about that is that there were two prominent Nadcap people that sat on AMEC, and you would have thought that this would have happened a long time ago, because you had Marcel Cooperman on there, and you also had Doug Madsen on there as well. And most of the time, Doug was the chair for quite some time on there, and Marcel was the senior staff engineer. So why this cooperation didn't exist before, I have no idea. But the good news is that I think it's coming along. I think it's starting to work out a lot better for everybody. The other thing that I just wanted to mention, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think another powerful thing of that is you got people like Ed and you and some other members that actually sit on both. They submit on AMEC, but they're highly visible and working at Nadcap level 2 to bring those issues to light. So I think we're seeing a nice connection between staff engineer, the leader, chair, as well as members that are serving in both capacities.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it's starting to work out pretty well. Two other things just to mention. 2750, we've been trying to expand that. And yes, you did hear me right, pyrometry spec, not 2759, 2750. There's a works to get 2759/1 and 2759/2 into play. /1 will cover composites, which for us heat treaters really doesn't mean a lot, but the /2 is going to be for hip, for anybody that's doing some of the hip work out there. So there's a lot of good stuff coming down the pipe, but it's like everything else. The wheels of progress don't move quite as fast as we'd like them to, but we're working on it.
Yeah.
I guess that's all I got for AMEC, unless somebody's got a question.
Yeah, I'm not going to let you off easy here, Roy. Come on. Okay, so that ARP 1341, do we happen to know how many specs are referencing that? Because I'm agreeing with you. I never use it, and I go, if anything, it's the 1820. So can't we identify how many specs are using that thing?
Well, we've kind of like tried to do a mass appeal to everyone, and Kevin Gromville, who's the EC for AMEC has even reached out to the commodity committees, which, they asked, hey, who's using this? And there
Right.
doesn't seem to be a lot of interest, but this is one of those things where, we'll cancel it or
Mhm.
stabilize it. And next thing you know, somebody's coming out of the woodwork, oh, wait, well, no, you can't do that, and again, that's why I say everybody needs to be involved, but,
Yeah, well,
it's not always possible.
certainly you could cancel it and just say, okay, refer to 1820 or something, because I'm in agreement. I think you should just cancel it, get rid of it.
Yeah, I don't know
Yeah, I mean, if this,
of that route, only because you don't always get a specimen that is amenable to 1820 geometry requirements. And it's nice to have a standard spec for a perpendicular mount that has a bit of sensitivity because of the lighter load involved for detecting things like surface contamination. And I'm definitely not wanting to get rid of it. And being a recommended spec, it just means it's out there for a user to use as they see fit in their system. I know we use it here at Solar, and I did in my previous life
Oh.
as a fallback when I couldn't get a test piece of appropriate geometry for 1820. And customers felt good that there was some standard out there that you could offer them instead of just your own interpretation about how to overcome the issue. So, stabilizing it, that makes sense as long as all the bugs are worked out for whatever community of users there are. And you are right, Bob. I don't think there's any spec out there that actually calls it out like 820 does.
Right. That I haven't run into one.
one of the comments that I've seen about it, and I've only seen a couple, is that, as you were saying before, Ed, that there's a little bit more stringency there as far as the measurements go. And somebody had made the comment that they would like to open that up to the same as 1820. So we can talk about that and see, but as you said, if you feel that there is a need for a more stringent standard, then obviously that would be counterproductive to changing that standard.
Yeah. So it sounds like this would
So,
be a good.
I don't think.
I'm sorry. It sounds
Pardon?
like it'd be a good conversation to have at that next AMEC committee meeting. Bring them both up and decide how we want to use it. But yeah, I didn't know Ed was using it, but I think as long as we have somebody that's using it, then we do need to make it make sense. That's all.
Right.
Well, Roy,
Right.
we asked the membership to respond to that spec, and we had several comments that we submitted to the sponsor, who can help bring those up at the Nashville meeting.
Okay, that's good. I don't know. Did I happen to mention the? Let's see. There was one other spec here.
You
The
forgot to mention the due date.
Yeah, I forgot to mention something here. I had a thought. I'm sorry. What'd you say, Bob?
You forgot to mention the due date for the 10th of a degree digital recording equipment.
Yeah. I still get hit up for that every once in a while. Was there any way that we're going to be able to roll that back? And I'm afraid that that's part of Pandora's box. I really don't see, you're going to have a lot of people on the committee that, well, I've already done that. We've already invested the money,
Right.
I mean, I thought that, we could ask, and I'm just throwing this out there. One of the biggest sponsors of MTI is SSI. And I mean, if they know of some workarounds, they could do a presentation on that or something, perhaps, maybe that would be worth looking into.
Yeah.
I'm just people transition.
I just wanted us to, I wasn't going to debate this with you right now, but I just wanted to remind everyone that June 29th, 2023 is D Day for digital recording equipment to be reading to a 10th of a degree. And as far as these requirements go, you have to meet that requirement at that time. Now, AC 7102/8 has not come out yet, right?
I'm sorry.
AC 7102/8, the pyrometry spec.
No, it's not.
So,
it's got to go through Nadcap. I think Joanne doesn't have to go through Nadcap Management Council first.
It's under ballot right now. That ballot closes tomorrow. So
Oh, okay.
I would expect that it will be any comments, and there have only been a few. I checked it this morning. And I suspect that those comments will be resolved fairly quickly, and then it will go into the 90-day implementation period. So we're
Yeah.
probably less than 4 months out from that being published.
Okay, so, yeah, so, and then 90 days after publishing, it's got to be in effect, which probably everybody's already done already anyway, but.
Does that
Just-
does that cover the AMEC report, Roy?
Pretty much. The only one other thing that I forgot to mention was we're looking at AMS 2745 for induction hardening.
Mhm.
And I don't know if you'd sent anything out to your members about that or not.
We did.
Or-
We're
but-
still waiting for comment.
did.
You know, a couple of people have Doug Schuler is the sponsor on that, and I just talked to him on the phone earlier, and he's like, well, the two people that talked to me said, oh, we're good with it. And to be honest with you, George Giger helped me, and we looked through this thing, and he's like, wow, this thing, look at this thing, is just kind of like full of holes, and it's really not much of a specification at all. And he called out that there is a recommended I think it's a recommended practice that's called out in there, like 4915 or something like that. ARP 4715 is called in at, and so we looked at 4715, and it's got way more technical stuff in it than the actual standard itself. So the only way to reconcile that, of course, would be for someone to take it on and probably merge what the good stuff that's in the ARP. But some people like it the way it is, and I don't know if we should rock the boat or not and do anything with it. But to me, I looked at it, and I kind of like chuckled after George told me, yeah, hey, you need to look at that. And so, yeah, but that's it for AMEC.
Okay.
All I can say is join, come and see us, join if you can. Even if you can't join us, I still say we need people in the commodity committees, because don't forget, it all starts at AMEC, but it ends in the commodity committees. They have to vote it through to get it up to Aerospace Council. So if AMEC's not your bag, try one of those commodity committees, please.
Yeah. Well,
And ASTM as well.
Anybody that's anybody that's wanting to move into any of those committees, always feel free to email me again at tom@heattreat.net, and I'll connect you with Roy or Stephen and get you on the right path to serving. Awesome, Roy. Well, thank you very much for that. So now let's go shift into Nadcap, who AMEC writes the rules and law, and Nadcap enforces the rule of law. So let's start. I guess Bob Ferry and Ed, I know y'all as chairs of the Technical Standards Committee, y'all were not able to make the February meeting at Nadcap, but is there any leading comments that you want to make? And then Roy and Janet can kind of pick. Joanna's going to do a MMC report in a little bit, but y'all can play off of what Bob and Ed say.
I'm okay with, I know Roy was there and pretty active in the discussions that were going on. So I'll defer to Roy on this one.
Okay.
Sorry, I missed it.
Right. And I just want to thank the team, Heather, Chad, Roy, and Joanna, for all they do with that Nadcap committee, because I'll tell you what, it takes more than one person to kind of report on all of the various factors going on during that meeting. And I think they did a great job with it. So thank you. And I look forward to the report out.
Okay.
Thank you.
So Roy, we'll just turn it to you and let you kind of give a synopsis.
I hate to dominate your webcast. That was one of the things at Nadcap. They did I guess the staff engineers had sent out, and it said that only a few people seemed to dominate the meeting. So I quickly took offense to that for some reason. Well, so, one of the things that the /8 that was brought up earlier, I think that we worked through that pretty well. I mean, it is what it is. It's following 2750. I don't think there were any, there weren't any things going on there. There were no, I always look for possible /S comments going in there, and I don't feel that there was any issues with that. So that being said, I think we got through that pretty quickly. One of the things that one of the biggest things that we talked about, or that I felt we needed to talk about, was the AC 7102/5, which is it's for hardness testing and conductivity. And Joanne is well versed in the politics here of this whole situation. But what we've tried to do is we've said, listen, I had an audit and it had AC 7101/4 invoked in it because we were doing micro hardness testing. And there were some other things that we were looking for as well that I did not realize that document points back to other AC 7101 documents. And so those are also invoked upon you if you don't read them carefully. Okay, so what we came up in last October, and we approached the chair and we made a proposition that we should take our /5 hardness and conductivity checklist and expand on that to do micro hardness testing and what other lab things that are very pertinent to heat treat for us to prove out results. And it was well met. And it was well met by the chair. Mark Emerson's been great, let me tell you. But the secretary did not want to really enter that in, nor did the staff engineer want anything to do with that whole situation, because there's this mutual use agreement, MOU, thing with MTL, which is the Materials Test Laboratory commodity, and they are controlling obviously the AC 7101/4 checklist, and they wanted us to, they really didn't want us to try and get our own checklist. Got stonewalled for, I don't know, Joanna, like a year at least? I mean,
Yes.
it was a very long time since.
Yes.
And so finally in Los Angeles, we said they could put it on they finally put it on. Mark Berval handed it off to Will Farnell, I believe, another staff engineer. And it came up on, it actually made the agenda, which I was quite happy to see and shocked. So next thing we know, they're putting up a plan for us to do this, but they've got all these MTL members listed for subcommittee. And we're like, no, that's not what we asked to do. And that's not what you were instructed to do by the chair. You were instructed to give Doug Schuler, the subcommittee guy, a word copy of the document of AC 7102/5 and let him cherry pick whatever was in the AC 7101s. We would come up with a draft. We'd put that before the heat treat task group. And then perhaps we might ask MTL, hey, what do you think? But no, the staff engineers were hell-bent on having MTL in that meeting. And it got to the point to where I basically said, he says, okay, we're just going to set up a meeting. And I said, okay, but we don't want any MTL members in that meeting whatsoever, an online webcast. Okay, understood. Lo and behold, we have the meeting a few days ago, and not only did it seem like 6 MTL people show up on the webcast, but the chair actually showed up as well. And they were voicing their displeasure to a great degree. And we just basically told them, no disrespect intended with, in regards to MTL, but this isn't even in the stages yet where we would even ask for MTL's help yet. So what we'd like you to do is give us our checklist as you were instructed to do so, and then we'll meet. And we'll meet as the heat treat task group, because this is a heat treat task group concern at this point, and then we could consult MTL if needed. And that's the way I think we ended that meeting. If anybody else has anything to add to that, please chime in. So I think that's the way that went. The other thing that go ahead. I'm sorry.
Doug is just handling that at this point. I think it's back in Doug's hands where he's going to take a look at it, and he's contacted all the people from the heat treat committee, heat treat task group, that volunteered to help look at that specification and try, or that I call it spec, the AC 7102/5, and then make some modifications. And I think there's a meeting set up for April on that to our first meeting to get together and try to massage it. So hopefully,
I'm going to be honest with you.
it'll be better. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to be honest with you. I think the only way we're going to get to the point of where we want to do this and do it right is I think we're going to have to do some back channeling of our own within the heat treat task group, and we'll give the staff engineer what the staff engineer needs, and not until then. That's my method of doing it, and I think that's also Doug's method of doing it as well.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I think that's kind of where we're going with this thing. And, we've got some good support with, I saw some of the committee members. So I'm happy to see there's a lot of heat treaters on there to take a look at that and to try to, keep it making sense for heat treat. So, yeah, I'm encouraged.
Right. The other thing, just to move on a little bit, I wanted to say a couple things about the SSC Supplier Support Committee meeting. Unless somebody wants to talk anything else, Ed, or anyone wants to say anything else about the actual heat treat test group meeting. So the Supplier Support Committee meeting took place, and of course the PRI hierarchy were there for Nadcap, and it came out in the meeting that if you are staff engineer and you also hold the title of auditor, that you can see all the documents to the audit, and not only that, you can actually, and keep in mind, when I say all of the documents to the audit, I'm talking about the review, the supplier review that everybody's been up in arms about, that says, we don't want any retribution from anybody seeing these supplier reviews. Okay. And so now we find out they can see that too. Not only that, but then we discovered that they could see their own work. They could approve their own work with the audit. And a lot of people were like, well, what do you mean? And so I said there was a gentleman standing off to the side, and I don't know, I don't know who the higher ups of Nadcap are. And I just basically said to him, no disrespect, you're probably an IT guy, right? And he says, no, I'm the vice president of Nadcap. Okay, sorry, but it's quality. Let me just tell you what's going on here. You've got a whole room full of quality professionals in here. And I said that are either AS9100 approved or hold the Nadcap approval for their QMS. And I said, you're telling them that you're letting people check their own work. I said, that is just about blasphemous for someone to say that, because in the quality systems world, you do not audit yourself. You do not check your own work. And shockingly, he said, well, I don't see why and somebody said, yes, that's a conflict of interest. And he said, well, I don't see why that's a conflict of interest. And I'm like, seriously, you've got to be kidding me. So they have no clue. And just like with this AC 7000 that they're starting to roll out, which Joanna, well, I'm sure will tell you more about, it's requiring a lot of documentation that your QMS system through either Nadcap or through AS9100 is already requiring you to have. So I don't really know where they're going with that.
Well, they really don't have a clue in that element, because I know a big part of the discussion on day one was about the post-audit survey, and that it's placed in the wrong place. You have to fill out the post-audit survey before you get to reconcile your findings, whether they're majors or minors, and if they're valid or not. You have to do the survey. So I basically equated it to rating your professor in college before he gives you your final grade. Well, of course you're going to say that professor's a 9 out of 10. And we've done studies the last 2 years from our members that say 70% say they're not truthful on the post-audit review because of the potential retribution that could happen if an auditor could connect their comments in the survey back to their audit. And so PRI is just getting bad information because everybody's not being totally honest with how they think they perform. So they've really got to get a grip on that and get it together.
Well, one of the big problems is that it's one thing if you give an auditor a bad rating. You might not see that auditor for 2, 3, 4 cycles. They may forget about whatever you scored on there. But when the staff engineer is the auditor and he can see those comments, you might get him as a reviewer from another auditor, and you may not have a very good chance of getting some things taken off of your audit. That's what the suspicion is going to be.
It's just not set up for
and by the way,
success.
one other thing I forgot to bring up was the fact that, you know, there was a lot of things about these advisories that's being written, you know, for product impact, and people are still up in the air about all of that. And I guess come to find out, and correct me if I'm wrong, Joanne or Ed, but the number of actual ones that are confirmed as product impact is very low compared to the ones that basically throw the question out there and presume you're guilty before you're innocent. I mean, that's a huge amount.
So any more questions on NADCAP? All right, so Joanna, what you got something, Ed?
Yeah, real quick. Minutes are going to be posted for this February meeting shortly on eAudit.net. I encourage everybody to go review those, especially if you didn't go to the meeting. And if you did go to the meeting, look them over and make sure they're reasonably accurate, because if they're not, you have an opportunity to get them corrected in the next meeting. So, but there's a lot of good information, both from the Heat Treat Task Group, Supplier Support Committee, and all the NADCAP Management Council meetings in there. Goes a long ways towards filling in gaps if you didn't go. I know I'm going to spend a lot of time there.
Awesome, thanks for that.
Yeah, there seemed to be a lot of memory loss between what happened in October of last year with the staff engineers, as opposed to what the suppliers remembered. So that was something else to see as well.
There's a disconnect in the meeting room. Why wouldn't there be in the minutes? So Joanna, what do you got to say about the MMC?
Oh, I have plenty to say. I'm going to try and be quick because we're running out of time here, but I'm also trying to be thorough. I would like to.
Sorry, Joanna.
I would like to start with 2 of the main themes. The first one being participation. Excuse me. I would like everyone to participate, not just at Heat Treat, but also at NMC. We're still just under 50% of the commodities that have NMC representation from the suppliers. And so I encourage everyone, we already have an NMC rep for Heat Treat and an alternate, and also same for AQS, but we still have 50% of the commodities that are not represented at the NMC table. So if any of those attending today sit on task groups other than Heat Treat, I encourage you to participate as an NMC supplier voting member to NMC. The second theme that I'm going to reiterate is read the minutes. I checked this morning, the minutes are not posted, neither for Heat Treat or NMC, but keep an eye on the website so that you can get a full, better, complete understanding what's happening. I'll start with metrics. Unfortunately, one of the glaring issues that continue at NMC for, subscriber participation, there's 3 grades that are, or 3 metrics that are tracked for NMC participation, what they call equitable contribution. Unfortunately, the subscribers aren't participating to the degree they should. We're currently at 60% participation for ballot voting, or at least we're doing better in interviews, auditor interviews. We're at 96%, and observation audits are at 40%. So the subscribers are still not participating to the degree they should. Also in metrics, we discussed the customer satisfaction survey. That's a sub-team which is tasked to review a survey that was sent out to 4 stakeholder groups: subscribers, suppliers, staff engineers, and auditors. I was on that subcommittee, and there were more than 100 actionable items, which were defined as any topic that received anything lower than an 80% satisfaction grade would be addressed by the subcommittee. There are quite a few items on there that we, as the subcommittee, were not able to identify who the owner of that task should be. So there was a subscriber-only meeting of the subcommittee chairs to determine where some of those action items should reside. I have not seen a report out on what the resolution was for those action items that we weren't able to assign. Let's see, standardization. To your point, Roy, as it relates to potential product impact, automatic findings, you are correct. Those PPIs that have been converted to confirmed product impact is one, but it's unrelated to the actual PPI that was issued. And just to give you an idea of the volume, in 2016, there were 36 PPIs, 2017, 35, 18, 27, 20, 28, 29, 103, and so on. 939 total. And we are on pace at this point for 2023, since we're only a month and a little bit more, or almost 2 months. We're at a rate of about 800 for 2023. So there has been some concern from the subscriber base that maybe this isn't working out the way they thought it would. And so we may be just seeing the very beginning of some dissatisfaction with the volume of PPIs that are being issued. There has been a revision to T Form 1111, which is the organization form that is required to be submitted if a ownership change occurs or a physical location change occurs. As part of that, there was some discussion regarding the high number of submissions of that form that are not being made. And so there's discussion on what the consequences to suppliers will be if they don't submit the form when they should. Along the same lines of PPI, the OP 1103 has been revised to include that definition. So I encourage everyone to go to the documents page of eAudit.net and get the new OP 1103 definitions document. We also discussed the inconsistent use of the exit form. NMC has decided that if we're going to use a form, it should be used by all the task groups. That was kicked up to the steering committee, which agreed. And so there's a subcommittee working on identifying what changes are required for that form in order for it to be used by all the task groups. There's also a very strong move afoot to get the observation audit program back on track. Lockheed seems to be the primary pusher on that issue. The Globalization Committee, yet again, we discussed Nadcap meeting in Asia. It was decided that the only Asian country that should be a candidate for that is Singapore, but we wouldn't anticipate a meeting occurring in Asia until approximately 2026. We also discussed the additive manufacturing task group, which will be a new task group. It is currently in welding, but it's going to become its own. And we have a new subscriber, General Atomics Aeronautical, which gave a presentation. That presentation will be included, or is supposed to be included in the minutes. So I encourage everyone to open that presentation once the minutes are posted. Continuous improvement. The infamous AC 7000, which has been under potential revision for more than 1.5 years right now, We were finally able to come to some resolution on one of the primary objections, which was that suppliers will be required to establish and implement an ethics/fraudulent activity awareness policy. One of the sticking points in that paragraph was the fact that we would have been required to flow that down to our suppliers. So I have disapproved this document every time it's come up for ballot, primarily because, as Roy referred to earlier, we're putting QMS requirements in what was originally proposed as an administrative checklist. AQS task group has major objections to adding those types of things to the 7,000, but those objections are not being well received. But we did have a success in that we were able to revise the wording for the ethics/fraudulent activity awareness policy, and we will not be required to flow then that requirement down to our suppliers, and that was a huge win. Let's see. The steering committee, we reapproved the emergency plan, and we discussed the customer satisfaction survey at length because, again, we were unable to identify those subcommittees that would be responsible for some of those action items. Planning and ops. The training for the new paragraph that will be appearing in AC 7000, probably within the next 90 days or so, that PRI has composed training for both auditors and auditees so that they understand what the requirements are and what training will be required for it in terms of our employees. Prior to take it or to be trained in person, auditees, on the other hand, will have access to training tutorials on the eAuditNet website, and they have not yet decided how that's going to roll out for auditees. There was a continued discussion regarding the exit form in planning and ops, and planning and ops has stated, yes, if we're going to use a form, everyone should use it. And I think that's it. So pay attention to the minutes. There's quite a lot of activity. Again, I encourage everyone who is able to participate as an NMC member. And that's my pitch.
Awesome, Jana. Well, thank you very much for that report. So real quick, Ed, on the back end, I know we got AS13100 dealing with engine parts. I mean, I know you had a report. What's on that report?
Yeah, the 13,100 was, it's actually, many elements have been around. If you've been a direct GE or United Technology / Raytheon supplier, you've probably might have been exposed to some of this, maybe not. But the official rollout was January 1st. All of the engine subscribers are pretty focused on the top tier of suppliers, bringing them into compliance. Just so you know, AS 13100 is a quality management system supplement. So if you're AS 9100, that's not enough. You've got to include all these elements from 13,100 if you expect to do engine work for any of the world's engine manufacturers. They are all supporting this. The one thing they failed to do was to get a common auditing authority. They could not agree on how to go about doing that. And so consequently, each one of them is setting up audit teams to go out to the field and audit 13,100 at each of their supplier sites. It's probably going to take them a while to get down to the level that most heat treaters operate, which is usually 2 and 3 and 4 tiers away from the original engine manufacturer. So in that regard, you might have some time to work things out. However, look in your flow down. If you are used to getting any engine parts and you know for sure that's where they're coming from, be sure to watch out for changes in quality terms and conditions, calling out for compliance to AS 13,100. Because it's probably, for most of us, it's the only way we're going to know about it. If you want more information about 13,100, It is a program operated by the Society of Automotive Engineers, SAE. Well, once again, they're involved in our lives. And this is through a group, a subgroup called the Industry Technology Consortium, ITC. If you go to the SAE website and you click on SAE ITC, you look for the Aerospace Engine Supplier Quality Group, AESQG. And on that tab is going to be a mountain of information about what the engine manufacturers are expecting from the supply chain. And really, it is from the standpoint of administration and folding it into your quality management system, it is a lot of work. I've spent the last year part-time messing with this in our system at Solar, and we're only just now getting to where we're rolling it out and starting to prep for training. Once it's in place, I think for a lot of heat treaters, it won't involve a huge amount of work unless you have customers who are real sticklers for the details that are in there. And to that end, I invite you to, be informed, take the courses that are recommended to be taken on the AESQG site or page. There's two of them. One of them is quality requirements. The other one's called quality foundations. They're not cheap, but if you're going to do engine parts, you got to have them. And then there's the DPRV, designated process release education that you have to have. That's another expensive course, all of course done by SAE. So there's a lot to get over to get it into your system. I don't know that on any given day it's going to amount to a tremendous amount of work at most places, because they're not going to go back in time and make you apply all of the advanced product quality practices or PPAPs or all that on a backward looking basis. They will if they make a change to an established product. And of course, if it's a new product, then you'll have to do the full 9 yards of requirements. And so do be aware this is in place, and it's going to be showing up in quality terms and conditions. There's no time like the present to go find out what this is going to be about and how much you may or may not have to do within your respective businesses to comply. But if you're strong in aircraft engine components and parts, you will not be able to avoid this. I can tell you that right now. So.
Awesome. Well, Bob and Ed, any final thoughts as chair?
Well, I just had a question on that 13100. Has any of the OEMs come to your facility to audit to that document yet, or no?
No, in fact, Solar is joined as a member, but mostly so we could gather information about what's coming down the line. And some of the primes like the GE and Pratt, I think, are pretty far along in funding. Audit teams are going to go out. Like I said, they're limited though, which means they're going to focus very much on the first tier suppliers, and especially those that have design authority. So, the Moogs and Parker Hannifins and Eatons and Howmets and Arconics, so they're all going to get hammered pretty early on. But soon after, you can expect to see stuff starting to show up in purchase order and quality terms and conditions to the next couple of levels down. And that's when it's going to hit the fan, basically, at our level. So my guess is they're going to beat up the first tier suppliers to go out and audit their suppliers, which may be some of us. And that's when you'll really have to be faced with deciding how you're going to deal with this.
Okay.
Does that system, Ed, does that system have different submission levels? Like with,
Yes.
Like when you do a PPAP,
Yep.
Sometimes all you need is the process and a part submission warrant.
That's right. Yeah. There, at the special process level where we are at, we will probably have somewhat limited exposure to PPAP requirements. I have to say, Solar's had a couple of customers in aerospace doing this for a number of years now already, because they had design authority and they were making engine parts. And it was a royal pain to get this set up and running. Thankfully, our customers had their own templates online, which makes it a whole lot easier to deal with than us keeping a whole bunch of records that really don't mean that much to us per se as they do to our customer. So, but you know, everybody's record keeping requirements are going to be different because there's not a common set agreement on how that's going to be done. So that's where the auditing part of this, I think, fell down, is at the actual application level for each prime was just a little bit different, and they couldn't resolve those differences.
Yeah, I just wish that everybody could agree upon what those assessment numbers are for those to generate those RPNs.
Yep.
If there was a general agreement about with everybody, that would make life a lot easier.
Yeah.
I haven't had to do one for aerospace, but I used to have to do them for automotive all the time.
Yeah, well, it's come back now. You got away from it for a while. It's back now in aerospace and spades.
Gotta love it.
Yeah.
All right, well, gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, Joanne and everybody, thank you so much. I want to say thank you for you and this team for really guiding MTI's Technical Standards Committee down a good path. Anybody that wants to be involved, I would encourage you to stay involved, get engaged, and get on a volunteer team like we have. You can email me at tom@heattreat.net and I can lead you down that path. But members, stay focused, have a good 2023, and we'll see you on April 20th, where the next Heat Treat Live webcast is going to talk about how to minimize your liability when things go awry with our statement of limited liability. We're going to have an attorney on that's very familiar with that process. We have had a member be saved a $5 million lawsuit because of that statement of limited liability. It works, and you need to understand the legal requirements behind it and how to use it effectively. So see everyone, have a great spring, and I'll see you on April 20th. Everybody have a great day.
Awesome. Thank
You
you.
too. Thank you.
Everybody.